Yeah, if there had to be a slogan for this election, it might be "What election?" Most Tunisians that you speak to cannot name a single candidate among the 1,000 plus candidates running in this vote. There are no political posters, campaign posters, really almost anywhere when you drive around the city. The candidates aren't even really allowed to speak to the foreign media, such as us, under a strengthened new electoral law. So people are really basically asking, what's this whole exercise for? Why are they even going to the polls? What makes it a little more perhaps animating for a lot of Tunisians is, remember, this is Tunisia. This is the country that brought the world the so-called Arab Spring uprisings. A little more than a decade on, those Arab Spring uprisings, what was once called the Arab world's biggest success story, Tunisia, is a really distant memory. When you say people have other things on their minds, I mean, what's going on? The economy, debt, inflation, unemployment, especially among young people, upwards of 40%. People are really just looking around the stores for basic foodstuffs right now. The inflation is cutting into every single household budget. These parliamentary elections, people say they need them like a hole in the head. And because it has been the parties themselves have been sort of cut out of the equation, and candidates are now presenting themselves individually, not on behalf of parties, it makes them even more unknown. It gives them even less power. So what people feel like, if they even bother to show up, the parliament they will end up electing, and remember, it's a two-round vote for the first time here, 2 rounds of voting, the parliament they'll end up electing will be essentially toothless, unable to really check and balance what they see as the increasingly authoritarian power of the president, Kais Saied, who basically suspended parliament in July of last year, and ever since, his critics say, has been continuing his power grab, consolidating power, undercutting the country's democratic institutions.
Now, secondly, Doug, Tunisia was long seen as being a flag bearer for women's rights across the Arab world. But as the nation votes where you are this Saturday, some fear that that heritage is in fact now in danger.
Absolutely. Tunisia was the beacon of women's rights and women's protections across the Arab world. And perhaps, that dates back to right after French independence under their first president, Habib Bourguiba. He was the one who enshrined these women's protections in the country's constitution. And everyone in the Arab world looked towards Tunisia as an example. What's going on now, it's not that those laws have been repealed. It's that the tone and the tenor of politics in this country, yes, under its president since 2019, Kais Saied, has been anything but progressive. There's under a new law that was passed shortly after the new constitution was approved last summer. Under a new law, there's no longer a requirement to have parity, gender parity between men and women in the parliament, in the country's elected assemblies, which means that technically you could still have a lot of women, but the reality is there's only a little over 100, I think it's 122 women running among the 1,058 candidates. You might say, okay, well, that's almost 10%, but think of it. In the last legislative elections, women ended up being almost a quarter of the parliament. Before that, a few years before that, it was almost a third of the parliament. Women's representation in the country's elected lawmaking assembly is going down. It's going down quickly. And while this president hasn't explicitly abolished women's rights, or with civil society with women active within it, there's a sense that by doing nothing, by not being progressive, by not pushing the vision of more activist women playing a bigger role in society, it's actually undercutting that role you were alluding to, the role of women as being a beacon for the Arab world here in Tunisia.